April, Riverside International Raceway. Lloyd Ruby's Camaro just shattered the qualifying record. It's a secret. An engine so radical NASCAR inspectors tore it apart on the spot. This wasn't just a race car. It was GM's forbidden weapon. Smokey Yunick's Hemi head, born in a Florida garage, killed by corporate fear. Tonight, the true story of the engine that could have rewritten history and why the suits silenced it, the Trans Am war and Chevy's desperation. When Ford launched the Mustang and it sparked a frenzy, the pony car era was born. Affordable, stylish, performance-oriented cars aimed at younger buyers. Chevrolet couldn't ignore the success. They fired back with the Chevrolet Camaro, built on GM's new F-body platform shared with the Pontiac Firebird. Its name Camaro was a made-up term their marketers cheekily claimed meant a small, vicious animal that eats Mustangs. And while that was pure PR fiction, the Camaro's bite turned out to be very real. Camaro offered something for everyone. Inline sixes for economy-minded buyers, small block and big block for speed enthusiasts, and a sculpted body with a long hood, short rear deck, and a low, wide stance. In its debut year, Chevy sold over Camaros, signaling a strong start. But Chevrolet wasn't just in it to sell cars. They wanted to win on the racetrack, too. In the world of American racing, prestige wasn't won on magazine covers. It was earned in the SICA Trans-American Sedan Championship, which began to compete in the over L class. Manufacturers had to produce at least street-legal versions of their race cars. To compete, Chevrolet needed a specialized model. The blueprint came from Vince Piggins, a quiet but brilliant engineer inside GM's Performance Products Group. He proposed a homologation special designed to exploit every inch of the Trans Am rulebook. Thus, the Z was born. Introduced in December, the Camaro was a homologation special. The model name itself came from Chevrolet's internal option code. RPOs and the package was a blend of lightweight performance and mechanical simplicity. Unlike the standard Camaro, which offered a range of engines and creature comforts, the Zoo's a tenacious track-focused machine. This wasn't a car built for comfort. It was engineered for war. "We didn't build a race car," Piggins once said. "We built 1,000 street cars that could be race cars." Its heart was the high-revving engineered to fit within the Trans Am's L displacement limit. The was a masterpiece of engineering. Combining the block of Chevrolets with the crankshaft from the this-stroker configuration yielded a displacement of perfectly legal for Trans Am racing. Officially rated at horsepower at RPM, and at RPM, the was famously underrated. Dyno tests and real-world performance suggested outputs closer to 2 horsepower in street trim, with race-tuned versions pushing even higher. The engine featured a high compression ratio of Tosalad lifters, a high-performance camshaft, and a Holley 4-barrel carburetor, making it a screamer that thrived at high revs. The Z package wasn't just about the engine. It included a heavy-duty suspension with stiffer springs, upgraded shocks, and a reinforced chassis to handle the rigors of racing. A close-ratio 4-speed manual transmission was standard, paired with a Positraction limited slip differential.
All buyers
Could choose from 2 or rear gears for optimal acceleration. The Z also came with, in rally wheels wrapped in Goodyear tires, and power-assisted front disc brakes were available to tame its speed. To meet SECA homologation rules, which required at least units to be sold to the public, Chevrolet produced cars in a number that grew to in as demand soared. The car stripped down. Nature was evident in its lack of creature comforts. Air conditioning was unavailable, and the interior was basic with minimal sound deadening to keep weight down. This was a car built for one purpose: to win races. Its street-legal status was almost incidental, a necessary compromise to get it on the track. The season was the Camaro's first full year in Trans Am, and Chevrolet tapped racing legend Roger Penske to lead its effort. Penske's team, with driver Mark Donohue at the wheel, transformed the Zinto, a race-ready weapon. Modifications included lightweight body panels, a roll cage, racing slicks, and extensive engine tuning. Donohue, a brilliant driver-engineer, worked closely with Chevrolet to optimize the car, exploiting every loophole in the SICA rulebook. The Z's VAs tuned to produce over horsepower in race trim with improved breathing through headers and a free-flowing exhaust. Chevrolet faced stiff competition, particularly from Ford's Mustang, which had won the inaugural Trans Am Championship, in with the Mustang already a success. They sent Jerry Titus and his Shelby-tuned Mustang into battle, and they dominated. Ford even bragged, "The boss is the baddest piece of metal on four wheels." It stung, and Chevrolet was not about to let it happen again. And Chevy turned to Roger Penske, the meticulous team owner, and Mark Donohue, the Princeton-educated driver-engineer, known for extracting perfection from imperfection for full Trans Am assault. The duo transformed the Z into a track killer with lightweight body panels, welded roll cage, racing slicks, and a dialetton that howled at high RPMs. But the Ford Mustang still had the edge. Mark Donohue, despite heroic driving, was frustrated. Ford had better top-end breathing. We needed an edge, something radical. Although the Sika S Trans Am series mandated production-based cars with the aim of keeping racing grounded in showroom reality, it left gaps for creative interpretation. Smokey Yunick, a legendary mechanic and rule bender, thrived in these gray areas. His mantra, "If it ain't written, it ain't illegal," drove his approach to the Camaro Z's shortcomings against the Ford Mustangs. Smokey Yunick, the dark artisan. To claw their way back to the top, Chevrolet turned to Yunick Henry Smokey. Yunick wasn't your average mechanic, a World War II BPIO turned engineering wizard. Smokey ran the infamous best damn garage in town in Daytona Beach. His Daytona garage was less garage, more laboratory of madness, reeking of race gas, sweat, and pure defiance, as one mechanic put it. This was Smokey Yunick's domain, a place where rules were bent and cars were reborn. He was part mechanic, part magician, and fully rebellious. Smokey had already racked up NASCAR Cup Series wins and an Indy victory. Twice named NASCAR's Mechanic of the Year. He was respected and feared for one reason. He could make a car do things the rulebook never anticipated. If it wasn't in the rulebook, Smokey took that as permission. One of Yunick's most daring creations was a Chevrolet Chevelle Slippery, so aerodynamically perfect that NASCAR banned it before it ever raced. He had secretly acid-dipped the car and made aerodynamic adjustments to cheat the wind, creating a more slippery profile that gave him an unfair but genius advantage. That was the kind of thinking Chevy needed to topple Ford. Despite General Motors' official ban on racing, instituted due to anti-rust concerns and public safety pressures, Chevrolet never fully stepped off the gas. Instead, they got creative. While GM couldn't support racing publicly, they funneled parts, engineering support, and secret funding through independent teams. And at the heart of that gray area operation, Smokey Yunick was tight with key. Chevy figures like Vince Piggins and Zora Arcos-Dunto and his Daytona Beach garage became a covert lab for GM's racing ambitions. Officially, GM was out. Unofficially, they handed Smokey the keys to the kingdom and looked the other way. Yunick's Bonneville Camaros were a prelude to his Trans Am ambitions. Yunick took the Camaro platform and transformed it into something entirely different. His G weren't showroom stock. They were custom layout race weapons. He often started with base Camaros or bare shells supplied by Chevrolet, and applied Z, badging, and components to meet the letter of the Trans Am rules, which required cars to resemble production models. But under the skin, they were anything but standard. Yunick engineered these Camaros with every trick he could muster. Extensive chassis tuning, aerodynamic tweaks, and power plants tuned far beyond factory specs. These weren't G as Chevrolet built them. They were monsters as Smokey Yunick imagined them, pushing the boundary between legal and legendary. Two of these cars were powered by highly tuned small block producing an estimated horsepower, while the third featured a Fira-breathing detuned to horsepower for reliability during endurance runs. The two small block Camaros, meanwhile, were masterpieces in mechanical engineering. Built around the factory-style Yunick's versions, shared almost nothing with showroom cars beyond their displacement. He outfitted the engines with high compression pistons, aggressive camshafts, and custom intake systems, all tailored for maximum performance and durability. The result, a mind-blowing horsepower, nearly % more than the official rating.
Damn.
And because these Camaros were intended for extended high-speed runs, he paired the engines with lightweight components and meticulous aerodynamic tweaks. But Yunick's brilliance didn't stop at the engine bay. To reduce weight, he employed acid dipping, a controversial but effective method where body panels were submerged in chemical baths to thin the metal. The result? Lighter Camaros that looked stock, but carried far less bulk. He then lowered the chassis by modifying the front subframe, dropping the car's center of gravity and improving aerodynamics at high speeds. Wider fenders made room for racing tires. Aerodynamic tweaks like flush-mounted drip rails and a laid-back windshield helped shave drag, a critical factor on Bonneville's long open stretches, where even minor gains meant more miles per hour. These weren't just flashy race cars, they were precision-built machines crafted for speed and endurance. The two small-block Camaros were specifically engineered to compete in Bonneville's L-Class, targeting both speed and endurance records. Each modification, every curve, vent, and internal component was calculated for maximum performance. And it worked. Yunick's team reportedly set over speed and endurance records, including sustained runs clocking over mph, a staggering feat for cars based on production vehicles. But the true beast of the bunch was the third Camaro, the one that didn't have to play by Trans Am's rulebook. It's built around a ferocious big block. It was tuned to produce horsepower thanks to high-performance heads, a custom intake, and a specially tuned exhaust. While the engine could have pushed even higher numbers, Yunick wisely detuned it for reliability. Because in Bonneville's grueling endurance classes, lasting the run was just as important as leading the pack. This big block Camaro was a showcase of Yunick's engineering audacity. Like its small block siblings, it featured a lightweight acid-dipped body, a lowered chassis, and aerodynamic enhancements. The car was fitted with specialized gearing and a reinforced drivetrain to handle the immense torque of the cubic-inch engine. At Bonneville, it set records in higher displacement classes, reportedly achieving speeds approaching mph on the salt flats. Its performance showed Chevrolet's capability to compete with larger engined rivals, even if the car was ineligible for Trans Am due to its oversized engine. To topple Ford's top-end breathing Mustangs, Smokey needed a radical edge. Enter the Porcupine Head, a revolutionary angle plug cylinder head born from a trio of engineering renegades. Dave Martins, Chevrolet's port design sculptor, Charlie Turner, a former Chrysler Hemi guru, and Smokey himself, the mad integrator and rulebook saboteur. These caned valve heads, nicknamed the glass-jawed monster by Yunick's lead fabricator, were beautiful nightmares. Setting lash on those valves felt like defusing a bomb, the fabricator recalled, the forbidden engine. Unlike the standard Z's iron-headed, this engine was an all-aluminum marvel, incorporating advanced components designed to maximize airflow, combustion efficiency, and power output. It wasn't just a warmed-over Z engine. This was an exotic, uncompromising race weapon designed in the shadows to obliterate the boss. The crown jewel of this engine, a set of wild, semi-hemispherical aluminum heads. Nicknames Porcupine Heads for their caned valves, which looked more at home on a big block than a high winding. These were on-off-shelf parts. Dave Martin sculpted the ports like art, while Charlie Turner shaped the combustion chambers with racing pedigree and high RPM hunger. The design moved the spark plug closer to the center of the chamber, boosting combustion efficiency, and opened the door to massive valves in intakes and in exhausts. That is bigger than what came on the production Z, and big enough that engine builders joked you could fit your fist inside the ports. Its massive valves ate low-end torque. This engine lived at RPM or died screaming, but with great airflow came great trade-offs. The huge intake runners sacrificed low-end grunt for high RPM fury, making this engine a beast on the track, but a bear on the street. And the spark plug's prime position came with a cost, turbulent exhaust flow that left the heads just short of perfection. Still, on paper and in testing, this thing screamed. It revved beyond RPM and made well over the advertised horsepower. The Hemi head featured a unique aluminum cross-ram intake manifold distinct from the standard. Z's optional cross-ram setup introduced a not a modified part, a clean sheet design only for the Hemi heads. Smokey Yunick's hats weren't just branding, they were functional velocity stacks. This was a one-off masterpiece, purpose-built to work with the caned valves of the Porcupine Heads. Its runners were shaped like smooth ovals, engineered to send air charging straight into the combustion chambers with minimal turbulence and maximum velocity. And it didn't come lightly armed. Perched on top were two Holley carburetors, each gulping down CFM for a total of cubic feet per minute. That is almost double the airflow of the production Jingle Holley, and even outflowed the already impressive dual CFM hulls on the production Cross Ram. To tame all that fuel and air, Chevy engineers gave the plenum directional ridges. A clever fix for uneven mixture distribution, especially in cylinders 4 and 7, which often got the short end of the fuel-air stick. These ridges helped ensure every cylinder pulled its weight, even in the heat of battle. And sitting atop the carbs, a pair of Smokey Yunick hats. These weren't just air horns. They were a tribute to Smokey Yunick's signature black cowboy hat and his notorious knack for tuning systems no one else could tame. But this wasn't a street-friendly setup. There were no heat crossovers, no chokes, cold starts, forget about it. This was built for racing, plain and simple. Instead of relying on underhood air, it drew cool. Pressurized air from the base of the windshield through a cowl induction system. Perfect for building dense Power P-packed mixtures at high revs. Even the mounting bolts were different. Instead of the standard small blocks horizontal bolts, this prototype used vertical ones. A subtle but clear message. This engine didn't play by the rules. It's with radical caned valve heads and a monster intake setup. The Hemi head already looked like something pulled from a mad scientist's sketchbook. But to truly unleash its potential, Chevrolet had to go further. And they did, with pistons forged for war. Built to squeeze every ounce of performance from the Trans Am's and Limit, these toe compression pistons weren't your run-of-the-mill slugs. Their crowns were custom-shaped to work in harmony with the semi-hemispherical combustion chambers, making room for those dramatically angled valves, while promoting efficient, explosive combustion. This wasn't just a step up from the standard Z compression. It was a giant leap, one that demanded race fuel, razor-sharp tuning, and nerves of steel. Detonation was always lurking just outside the safe zone. Topping off the Frankenstein motor were magnesium valve covers, not just for show. Oversized to clear the complex valve train and strikingly similar to big block covers, they cut weight and added to the engine's aerospace mystique. This wasn't just a race engine. It was a piece of prototype art. All the major components. Heads, intake manifold, pistons, and even a lightweight aluminum water pump carried O-prefix part numbers. A clear sign from GM's engineering department that these parts were never intended for mass production. They were experimental, rare, and reserved for the inner circle. A Hot Rod article attributed to GM engineering, but closely linked to Yunick himself, claimed the engine pushed out horsepower. Naturally aspirated from a dynanode once under perfect non-race conditions, probably sustained in an hour. Trans Am dogfight. Unlikely. Experts like Gordon Kirby and John Lingfelter peg reliable race output at 2 horsepower, still plus horsepower over the iron head. That S over horsepower more than the factory-rated Zand, well beyond what most Trans Am competitors had ever seen. Sure. The standard Zoe's underrated at horsepower with race-prepped versions, probably making 2, but that wasn't just pushing the envelope. It tore it in half and lit it on fire. The drivers whispered told the real story. Lloyd Ruby, the primary test pilot for Yunick's Hemi head Camaro, was no stranger to speed. But after his first shakedown run, he came back white-faced. "Smokey," he reportedly said, "this thing pulls like a goddamn jet fighter. But it feels like it's going to blow sky high any second." That raw, untamed power defined the Hemi head's edge and its danger. At Riverside was the Hemi head's moment to shine and its spark before death. Ruby wasn't just fast, he was untouchable. The Hemi head breathed where the boss gasped, setting a qualifying record that stunned the paddock. But then came the hammer, disqualified for chassis violations, acid-dipped body, lowered subframe mods, not the engine itself. The engine's potential was terrifyingly real. That scared the competition as much as it scared GM. GM corporate guillotine. By early, Chevrolet quietly pulled the plug on what could have been the most formidable small block in Trans Am history. Despite Smokey Yunick's tinkering and the rumored horsepower dyno runs, the Hemi head was dead before it ever truly lived. The reasons weren't only mechanical, they were political, financial, and strategic GM moves. Mark Donohue and Penske Racing had already made the Z championship machine. The iron head was reliable, torquey, and deadly effective, beating Ford at their own game, in and on track to do it again, and why mess with success? The GM executives asked themselves, why risk a scandal for an unproven engine when we're already winning? OGM. The Hemi head was overkill. Marginal gains for maximum risk. The exotic aluminum parts were expensive, fragile under stress, and didn't play well with the street-driven cars Chevrolet actually needed to sell. Worse, the engine lacked low-end torque, making it a harder sell even for racers who needed punch out of corners. Compared to what the Standard was already delivering, and the promise of big block beasts like the Zeetel, this side project looked more like a money pit. But why it really died went beyond cost and complexity. It was a clash of winning fear and corporate gamesmanship. But the elephant in the room is the GM's racing ban. Since GM had enforced a strict no-factory racing policy, officially, they weren't involved in motorsports. Unofficially, they absolutely were, through backdoor deals, shadow projects, and trusted hands like Vince Piggins and Smokey Yunick. But the Hemi head was too visible, too loud, too close to violating the corporate facade, and so GM feared NASCAR's wrath. If this exotic Chevy engine dominated Trans Am, Bill France Jr. would ban it, and retaliate against Chevy and NASCAR, their real cash cow. And Smokey Yunick's reputation didn't help. Yunick's Chevelle scandal made him radioactive. Associating the Hemi head with him guaranteed NASCAR's veto. Smokey Yunick's fury was palpable. He didn't hold back, reportedly saying, "They didn't kill it because it wouldn't work. They killed it because it would work. And they were too damn scared of France and Ford bitching about it. A few sets of heads were ever made and a few full engines were built, but that was it. 3 complete engines, maybe. A handful of heads, crated, forgotten. GM's greatest what if, not nearly enough to meet any kind of homologation requirement or justify mass production. The engine never had a fighting chance. So, by the spring of Chevrolet made their decision. Forget the Hemi head. Stick with the proven formula. Put the wild thing back in the box." Today, this one-off engine and car combo represents a fascinating moment in the muscle car and Trans Am racing eras. An experimental monster that could have changed the game if given the green light. Never say never. We've got 3 complete engines. Maybe a handful of heads crated forgotten. GM's greatest what if the glass-jawed monster was silenced. Ford won the Trans Am title. Zell became legend in Smokey Yunick's Hemi head. It faded into myth until decades later when a crate marked Project HH surfaced in a Daytona storage unit. What if GM had found its spine in? What if the Hemi had forced Ford to abandon the boss a year early? Could this engine have saved the Camaro from the S-oil crisis? Or would its complexity and cost have doomed it anyway? Drop your take in the comments. Was Smokey Yunick's monster a lost masterpiece, or a bullet GM wisely dodged? For years, whispers floated through the muscle car underground. Stories of a Camaro that pulled like no other, of an engine with magnesium valve covers, and a roar too crisp to be ordinary. Most dismissed it as legend, a ghost from the salt flats. But decades later, something strange began happening. A few rare engine builds surfaced at high-end auctions and back-alley speed shops, built from old blueprints, traded sketches, and dusty prototype parts smuggled out of shops like Yunick's. Enthusiasts and custom builders obsessed with lost performance history began. Resurrecting the Hemi head in modern restids and outlaw builds,